Hello everyone and welcome to Young China. We're a half Chinese Brit and a Siberian Russian living in China. We share our experiences with you to demystify and translate Chinese culture and lifestyle. My name is Lucien.
My name is Artem. We are entrepreneurs who made it in China and now we are sharing our experience with you. Again, repeating your... What do you say? Something wrong?
I can't remember. Alright, so last time we spoke about the difference between North and South. And we touched upon regional variations in dialect and language. And I think that's such an interesting topic to go into because China's such a massive country. There's so many different dialects, variations of Mandarin. And we could talk about this for days and days and days and days.
No, but today let's talk in general about Chinese language, Mandarin, dialects, and how we learned it, or how we failed to learn it, actually.
So how long have you been learning Chinese then?
That's actually a very tricky question because every time they're asking, and before it was like 6 years. Wow, it's so great. For 6 years, it's so good. Now it's almost 12 years.
Wow, it's so poor for 12
and
years.
Yeah, it's like, but the process of learning, like active process of learning was just like in my university for first 4 years. After that, I learned some new phrases, words for sure. I'm living in China. I work with Chinese people and I adding to my vocabulary every day some new words. But it's not that intensive now. Sometimes I come back like, my Chinese is so bad. I need to learn at least 2 hours every day. And I didn't have time. And I like, come on, no, stop it. So I would say I've learning Chinese for 4 years and then it just like a long break.
I know what you mean about sometimes I feel my Chinese is really good and sometimes I feel it's terrible. Like within my industry and daily stuff and hanging out with my buddies and stuff, my Chinese is, let's say, flawless, okay? Because I don't make mistakes and I understand everything. I can talk all about marketing and communications. But when I come across, say, engineering or law or politics, my Chinese really falters. And so you realize you're within this comfort zone, right? Of like your daily life and then your industry, your work and that circle. And once you're taken out of that, you're like, oh my God, actually, I don't know anything. But when I do encounter a new industry or a new client, I'm given, say, just 2 days or 3 days of looking through the wording or talking to them with the new words, I can pick it up very quickly. And I think once you have this very good basis, then everything else is pretty easy.
People who just start learning Chinese, they're pretty easy, and Chinese is like something totally different.
But then it also depends on your goal. So I've got friends who can actually write Chinese articles. I mean, really in this very Chinese poetic style, which actually some local people can't even write. So, because they're really obsessed with the language and they're really obsessed with the traditional culture and the history. And then also there's an age thing, right? Like, so for us, like we're a bit older and we're busy now with work.
No, it's actually really the process of memorizing some stuff is getting tough. I realized it. In university, like, even I was having fun, I don't know, I come from like with a big hangover like on the lessons and then that words and new information get in your brain so fast and you're like, oh, I know it somehow. And now it's not that
because
easy,
we have
man.
so much more information to take in.
I hope so. But I think that really like your brain
like the
is
synapses are
slowed down.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm pretty smart, so I'm going to say that my brain is quickened up.
The thing is, like you mentioned when you say like my Chinese is so great, it's very hard relations with Chinese language, Sometimes it's, yes, I did this negotiation, so good, they understand all and I understand them. Yeah. And then you go to, I don't know, on the metro and you met a kid who start to talk to you. And then he said some words and you don't know this word. Oh my God. Like a 10 years kid, Chinese kid, speak Chinese better than you.
I think also the difference between you and me is that you learnt by the book.
Like, actually, you really learn Chinese?
I'd never actually formally learnt Chinese. I just turned up. And
Wait. 5 years or 6 years ago,
5 years ago, yeah.
you came to China, and your Chinese
I
was...
spoke literally no Chinese. So we never spoke Chinese at home. We just spoke English at home. So I came to China. Obviously, you pick up the basics very quickly, like ni hao, like hello. Where are you, Ni Zai Nali? That kind of thing. But I was very deliberate with wanting to understand things on a very granular level. So, for example, when someone types me in Chinese, there's a function on WeChat where you can just translate automatically. So you've got the Chinese words and then the English meaning. But that skips a step because you don't actually understand what the word is or hear the sound of the word. So I would copy that into Google Translate every time. So you'd get the sound of the Chinese character plus the actual meaning of each specific word rather than of the sentence. And so, do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I did that for ages and ages and ages. I still do that now.
But still, I don't understand, how did you learn it? Anyway, you need to learn.
I was just learning from just talking to people. Honestly, like I really like putting myself out there.
So you never bought textbook? How do you learn grammar at least? Like how
just
the
talking
structure?
to people. Really, just talking to people.
Okay,
and that's what I realized about was I realized that my Chinese was very oral, right? So my written Chinese also, or my written Chinese was very oral. So it's very different. So if I wrote an article, it would look like a very long text message. But written Chinese, especially in newspapers and articles, it's very, very formal. And so that's something that I struggled with.
But anyway, still, like, I pick up like oral, but still, to learn characters, you need to learn characters.
No, man. No. I never, up until I think last year, when I realized that I really needed to break that plateau, I never picked up a book. Honestly, it was just
Okay, how did you write? I mean, like type.
Typing in pinyin.
Okay. But how you recognize words if you have never learned them?
I never look because I recognize them because people text me all the time, right, on WeChat. And I just know that, and then I translate it using Google Translate. So I've looked at it and translated it so many times that I'm then familiar with it.
Okay, we have a genius here. No, actually, I realized, I remember when we were in WeWork, and then I thought, like, your pronunciation, for example, is, I think, much better than mine. But when I write to you something simple, or like, oh, look at this character, and then I realize you don't know, or some things like this, then yeah, your written Chinese is not that good. And and when you say like you don't understand some like law and political things, the funny thing, I'm okay with that.
Because you've learned it, right?
Because my base of Chinese was learned in Russia mostly, like university. Actually, yeah, my major is China studies, but not Chinese linguistics. So I didn't have enough hours of Chinese, but still my base was done there. And the thing is, the first and the second year of university, I went to parties so much time. I don't know. I didn't learn properly. And that's how I didn't pick the like very simple words, like, some chair, table, or like all fruits. I still don't know many fruits and vegetables, how you call it, because I didn't went to lessons. But then I started to be more responsible, self-responsible, and I went to class
during the harder classes.
Yes, correct. So I'm okay with the reading like some articles, like news thing. So yeah, I can read some economical and political articles, but for now, I hardly can remember how to say tangerine or orange in Chinese. I always confused with this, really, till now.
And then I think it's also about where your priority lies, right? So I'm not interested in food generally. So a lot of foods I just don't know. But everything within my industry, anything to do with marketing or media, like I know. I think it's very interesting how you and I have learnt Chinese differently. So I basically absorbed it in this very informal fashion living here in Shanghai. So there are lots of basic words that if you're learning formally through courses, you would have learnt very early on. And I didn't pick those up until sometimes I find that I'm picking them up now. but there are some like very local, like slang type words which I know, which a lot of other foreigners they don't. It's very interesting how our experiences differ so much there. And I think especially if you learn from a textbook, you have to learn by grade, and then you'll have like this depository of like, I think 2,500 words by the time you're HSK 4 or 5, right? And
I never passed HSK. I mean, I never got tested. I never tried it. I know why.
Right, and then so there are some words like 解决 and 处理, which I think are only HSK 2 or HSK 3. I only learnt that like last year. I've been here for 5 years. That's incredible, right? They're basic words, but you realize that you find a way around it. So 解决 and 处理, they mean to solve a problem.
Yeah.
And I just found a really roundabout way of saying it, which means 那你怎么办? What will you do about the problem? So there are some things where there's a gap in your vocabulary, but you don't even realize you have a gap. Like there are some things where I know I have a gap, right? If you're talking to me about politics or law, but other things like daily stuff, like I didn't even know there's a gap there. I didn't even know these words even existed.
But okay, maybe you wanted it so hard to learn something, and you try to go deeper every time someone sent you a message, and you keep asking your Chinese friends how to say like this, because I know a lot of foreigners who lived here for a long time, and like I don't want confused people that they will think that they will come to China and like naturally, very organic way they will learn Chinese as you. No, for sure. I will say like you need.
Sure, I had a plan. I wanted to learn Chinese for sure, but then also it's a different responsibility on me, right? I am half Chinese. I think being on the street and not being able to speak Chinese, locals here would think of me in a different way, right? If you're white with blonde hair and blue eyes like you are, it's okay in a way to not speak Chinese, right? People are a lot more forgiving for you.
But you're not. You don't look like Chinese, so I think the rules are the same. I mean, like, if we talk now and give some advices how to learn Chinese, doesn't mean like you come to China and you will pick up all that words and language like naturally. You're not a baby, like you're not a kid when they learn it naturally. Yeah, it's a big support, and for sure. I mean, like, if you ask me, can you learn Chinese without coming to China? No, for sure, no. It's not English or French or Russian even, You should be in this environment. But for sure, text and basis is very important. And I think, for example, like a grammar and some basic stuff, better if someone from your like native speaker, for example, English speaker, explain to you.
Mm-hmm.
Because they will have some parallels, some comparison with your language, and it's easy to, because for many Chinese people, if you ask, they say like they don't have grammar. They're like, why do you say like this? I don't know, I just say like this. But we cannot feel this language vibes. We need for sure why it's like this, at least some logic, so you know how to use these words, how to use the whole construction of the sentence.
Mm-hmm.
But if we talk about oral things, for sure, Chinese teacher only, or better come to China.
Mm-hmm.
And when you say like we are different in the way how we're learning, yeah, I realized that I'm like failing after the second years of university. I come first time to China, to Dongbei, and then I can't understand anything, and no one can understand me. Even like I learned 2 years Chinese.
What was it? Was your accent? Was it the
didn't
grammar,
know,
the vocabulary?
I had enough vocabulary, but I cannot pick up all words together to make it fluent, make it like go. It was like super broken language.
Was it about being nervous, about not getting it?
I wasn't not okay with them, especially again northern people are more like straightforward. I don't know, you don't feel any like pressure from them. And I remember even after 10 years, that evening when we wanted to go to People's Park, which called like 人民公园, and I told her like literally 20-30 times to taxi drivers, and there was no smartphone that time, and I don't know how to explain. It's just 4 words: 人民公园, 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 人民公园. It's like, and then I already like gave up and say 人民公园. oh, 人民公园走走走. So it was like randomly, and then he understood. And it was like everywhere. On every corner, I went like maybe not like 20, 30 times, but I need to repeat like 5 times. And they need to repeat me like 10 times, and that's how I understand them.
Do you find, I found that used to happen to me a lot at the beginning when I spoke slowly, right? So if you speak slowly, they listen to the sounds of the characters. Whereas if you speak quickly, they just listen to the sentence. So for example, if I say 人民公园, right? So I've just started to learn Chinese, so I'm 人民公园. But if I'm like a local, I'll be like 人民公园, right? And they just get it.
Yeah.
So in that sense, like the more, it's kind of like this,
the whole sentence tones is more important than the words tone.
It's kind of like this almost this circular logic of like, the better you get, the better you are, or like the smoother you get, the better you are, right? And so you have to like get to that point of fluidity and confidence to then get much better.
That's how I survive now. I mean, like, my tones are awful. Mostly.
Your accent is strong. It's very strong when you speak Chinese.
But why they understand me? Because the whole sentence tone is correct. And probably the most useful words tones also correct. That's enough to understand. That's what I understand in China. It doesn't matter which accent you have. That's how like southern people understand northern people and Sichuan province. For me, for example, Hunan人, they mix H with F. They say Fulan, and then N with L, which for me is like, oh, it's breaking my mind, you know, like it's totally different. It's like you say like microphone or microphone, you know, but for them M and B, it doesn't matter. For them, they listening tones, you know?
Yeah.
So you can say computer or bobuter. It's almost it's the same for them because like if the tone is right. That's how you can say Fulanren is if it's right tone they understand. And this I realized in Guangdong when they mix the sh, they don't have sh, they cannot pronounce the sound sh.
Oh.
They say always s.
Yeah.
But before my trick, I didn't listen tone very much that time, and if I listen sh, it means 10. If it's s, so it's like 4, which is different tones, but I don't care because I listen to the
sh.
Yes, but then it doesn't work in this house. It's all 14块钱. And is it like 14 or 44 or what? And then I start to listen to the tones. It helps a lot. So like 4 is 4 and 10 is 10. Even you say 4, it's like the second tone. You know, it cannot be 4 because it's second tone. It's obvious. That's what they say. And then, my God.
I think this is the problem. Like exactly what we're saying is when you talk in just 1 or 2 words, that's where the problems come.
Yeah.
Because I'd never learned tones, right? So if you say to me a single word right now, I probably wouldn't know it unless it's a very easy one. But if you give me the whole sentence, for sure I'll know it because I just look at the context.
No, even Chinese people cannot get because like so many the same
so
words,
many,
even
right?
the same tone, the same pronunciation, but different character. So without context, you cannot get it.
But particularly with daily words, there's only like, I don't know, we'd have to do like real research on this to figure out the numbers, but probably you only use about 500 words a day. Right?
No, you don't need research. There is me here.
Okay. Oh,
usually, like normal people without high education, like these workers and like factory guys, they usually can recognize 1,500 to 2,000 characters. So it means like it's enough for like 80% of your life and to read most of newspapers. And like educated guys, they know about like 5 till 6,000 characters. And like the top guys, like 10,000, 12,000. But it's actually, I don't know how they made that research. It's maximum how much your mind can keep inside, you know, God. 10 or 12, but altogether 30,000 characters, 40,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But the most useful is like 2,000 or 3,000. You are enough. Because you combine words and like you use the same characters to create new words.
So actually, I think probably I use about 500 words. Honestly, like on a daily basis, right?
5-year kid.
So what's interesting is because now I'm starting to learn, right? I
Mhm.
make my assistant like teach me an hour every day. And so I have this app called Pleco, and there's like the HSK flashcards, right? So 1 to 6. And what's really interesting is because I'm studying for HSK 5 now, I'll like copy those words into my WeChat conversations. I haven't deleted any of my conversations for 5 years, right?
That's good.
So you'll see stuff that people have said to me, like from like 2016. I'm like, oh, that's what you meant back then.
It's
Right? It's really
interesting.
interesting how actually back then you could get their meaning just by kind of skipping over some words, or I would translate it and I wouldn't retain that in my mind, right? Those specific words, I would know it for that second, and then
Yeah,
move
that's
on.
why environment is super important. You get the 生词, a new word, and then you like use it in the real situation or already used it. That's how you can remember it, right? So yeah, it's good, interesting advice to learn.
I think what you just said also is something that just blew me away, is about combining words together. So even very simple words like 和 and 好. So these two are some of the most basic words like you'll learn on day one. But together they make up a very complex word called 和好, which means to get back together. So like girlfriend and boyfriend, they break up, they get back together. Just off these two simple words, it becomes a whole new meaning. And this word itself, 和好, is like a HSK5 level word. And that's what really annoyed me about learning Chinese, is that you just add two simple words together and it becomes like a whole different thing. And it becomes like a whole higher level. And no one's telling me this.
And probably you need to go and learn some grammar things, because many of the things have explanation and they're like systematic. Really. It's not just like randomly, you know.
Yeah. No, I can
like
understand the logic behind it, but if no one tells you it, then you don't know, right? Like you only figure out after someone tells you out. Like you can't figure out yourself.
Probably I recommend you have like 2 teachers for sure. At least one is your native, who is like can explain you good in grammar and some like this language structure, some basis things. And then for oral things, for sure, a Chinese person. And my mistake was not mine, actually. I think like my teacher was not great, really, at
Always
the time.
blame other people.
No, because in Chinese language, teacher is super important, your first teacher.
Yeah.
And my tones was failed. And the thing is, if you don't care about tones from the start, it's really hard to change it. You're like, it's so deep in my mind. If I really have big motivation for this, probably I need to use, 2-3 hours every day, just like fixing my tones. I don't have time for this now at all. And it's like, I don't know. So my big advice, take care about tones from the start. And especially it's super important. I gave you one example. And in the South, it was like, I actually pretty lucky that I got to Guangdong after my graduation, because it was not only like shi, si, si. There are a lot. For example, rou, this sound, which like R sound, rou, rang, rou. Rou is meat, rou, 4th tone. And that time, again, I didn't care about tones. My ex-girlfriend, for example, opened the fridge and she's like, there is no yo. She was local. And I was thinking there was no oil. But she cannot pronounce the sound r. They cannot in Guangdong.
Wow.
So they say, yo, it's meat. Yo, it's oil. But that time I didn't care. I said, if I hear this sound r, so I say, okay, it's meat. Doesn't matter which tone is this. So like really, like Guangdong can make you expert in Chinese tones for sure. Or like another Sichuan province, Hunan, Fulan, it's like Fulan, man. It's totally different words.
Yeah.
You change H to F and N to L. No, it doesn't matter. While tones is correct.
Well, I think then we should move on to the next topic of accents. And this is a big variation within China, right? So in the north, there's a lot more R. Right, particularly in Beijing and then Dongbei as well. And in the south, it's like you say, a lot more 四. So there's a lot more lighter. So like 我是四川人, whereas in Beijing, you'd be like, 我是北京人. And actually, I've got this really funny story. When I first came to Shanghai, and Shanghai is very light kind of accent, right? When I first came to Shanghai, all my colleagues were Shanghainese girls. And the way they talk is this very dainty, effeminate way, right? So they're like, 干嘛呀? 吃饭了吗? Right? So like, what are you doing? Have you eaten? 你明天干嘛呀? So it's like this very kind of, at the end there's always an or a ya. And I started to speak like that. And all my friends were like, why are you speaking like a girl, man? Because my environment is just Shanghainese girls. So that's how I learned. And now I have this kind of like this thick kind of Beijing Dongbei accent. I don't really know where I got it from, but I must have been so like motivated to not speak Shanghainese or in a Shanghainese accent that I just picked it up from, business trips or friends or TV. And so now instead of saying 干嘛呀, I'd be like 干呀, which is like a really thick like Dongbei like 干. But I find that these regional variations also have a very big effect on how other people see you as well. So if I say to someone 干呀, they then assume that I'm from Dongbei and I'm a bit more masculine and a bit more aggressive. Whereas if I spoke to them in the Shanghainese way of like 你干嘛呀, then maybe there is less of that kind of masculine confrontational aspect to it.
Yeah, and the funny thing, Chinese people say that most of the foreigners speak like a Henan人.
Oh, really?
Our accent when we speak Chinese language is really close to Henan people.
They've got a weird accent. I was there
many second tones and like it seems like really many Chinese friends like, oh, you're like Anhui or Henan ren, because Anhui is close to Henan. So we speak like Henan people for them.
So I was actually in Henan a couple of weeks ago. They speak, especially the taxi drivers, really, really local guys. They speak with a heavy accent, and it's actually very hard to understand.
Yeah, no, it's not about this. It's so bad. It's like about tones. They say like we speak really even good foreigners, Chinese. For them, it sounds like Henan or like Xinjiang ren. If you all speak, the problem of many foreigners, they speak all in the second tone. And like 新疆人羊肉串 hello. Actually, one thing I cannot understand, and I think it's not polite at all, how Chinese people start to 学你, like how to say, when they're repeating after you.
I think it's fine.
It's like they're mocking you.
Yeah, but people mock each other all the time for
Could
lots
you
of things.
imagine?
But you're only sensitive to it because you're so into language.
I cannot imagine I take a cab in London and I start to speak with my Russian accent in English and like, where are you going? And then the taxi driver like, okay, we're going straight now, and then we turn left here, and then it's not polite. And here, when you get a taxi driver and he understands that you're Laowai, many of them start to speak with you in a Laowai way. 你好 我们去哪儿现在去哪里 like they are like mocking you, whatever.
I think they're doing it to be easy on you.
They think if they speak the same with me, I understand better.
Yeah, maybe I think it's that. I think sometimes like a friend, like good friend, because actually on the whole, Chinese people culturally they don't really like diss each other until they're really good friends. Like this person really, really likes you when he's like dissing you or dissing your mum or like really using heavy swear words.
No, I understand it's not any bad intention, but still, like for me, if you just like transform it and like in Russia or like in England, it sounds weird when you just copy the accent of person who trying to ask you something.
But have you ever had this experience when you speak to an Australian person, you start taking on their accent? I do that a lot. Because I think there are some accents, like the Dongbei accent or Australian accents or even Irish accents, they're just very comfortable to say.
Laowai's accent is not comfortable to say.
But I mean, when they speak English, I don't mean when they speak Chinese. When they speak English, they're just very comfortable and they're very contagious, right? They're just really nice accents to speak in. It's like have you noticed when you speak to someone from the south of China, you don't copy their accent, but when you speak to someone from the north, you get influenced a lot more
because it's more standard Chinese.
I feel it's actually more comfortable like rolling off the tongue instead of 出门.
For foreigners.
Yeah, for foreigners, fine.
And a lot of sounds there not exist in South. In Sichuan and Guangdong, 这个, for example, ZH, no, 这个. So, originally, Chinese language is lack of many sounds. It's just
Here's an example of a thick, really local Beijing accent. And it's almost to the point that you kind of don't understand it. So towards the end, it just became one big R.
Yeah, it's typical.
Right? And and actually, it's a very, if you ever try and copy it, it's just a very comfortable way to talk. Like, it's just so relaxed. Like, you make minimal effort to speak. Like you start, and then by the end, like, your mouth is just kind of failing.
Don't you think it's because, like, close to our languages? Because, like, we have a lot of R anyway.
Yeah, I think so. I also think this is another reason why, in some ways, I think a lot of foreigners, they're also more attracted to the North in some ways, right? Of course, a lot of us live in the South because it's better living. But I think we're more attracted to the Northern culture, like, because it's more direct. There's a lot more similarities to our food, like meat and potatoes, particularly for Europeans and Russians and Northern Chinese. These aspects. But then, of course, we all live in the South because the economy and the weather is way better.
Yeah, we talked about differences in the previous episode, and we keep talking about the language thing, and you start to talk about dialects. I mean, we talk about different accents now, but if we go to dialects, actually it's different languages. For example, Cantonese. Yes, they use the same Chinese characters, but if you talk oral, it's totally different.
Yeah, completely
completely different in another language, and Chinese people don't understand each other, not only in Guangdong. Shanghainese people will never understand the Sichuan accent. It's totally different language, and sometimes they can recognize some accent when someone talk in Mandarin, and then they can, oh, you are Sichuan. No, I'm from Guizhou. Oh, like, even them don't understand the whole variety of all dialects, which is different language. I mean, like, let's say Ukraine or Belarusian, it's close to Russian language, but we don't call it dialect. Not only because it's different countries, but because it's different languages. But for me, I can understand, I think 60-70% of what Ukrainian people say, and if they write, like 90%. But we call different language. But Chinese people call it dialect, while it's super different. When I lived in Guangdong, I was influenced by local people in Guangzhou, and I started to learn even Cantonese. I bought textbook and then realized it's like 9 tones.
There's 9 tones.
Someone say like 7 tones at different schools, but even 7 tones. I'm struggling with 4 tones, and it's 7 or 9 tones. Some of books say 11 tones. And the thing is, there is no systematic learning of this. It's just more like oral language. Yeah. The same with Shanghainese. And when you here, at least you can ask in Mandarin, like, what tone is this? And then they can explain to you because they're learning it in school. But in Guangzhou, you say, why it's like this? I don't know. Just say like this. And then you just like, keep repeating, but it's 7 tones. How big is chance that it will be the right tone, right? Yeah. So it's like, oh my God. Then I stopped it and said, like, I better improve my Mandarin. Then I learned Cantonese till my 80s.
There's something I found really fascinating with some of my local friends from Shanghai or not from Guangdong. They can sing Cantonese music just from hearing it or going to karaoke. But I'm not sure if they understand the words or the meaning, but they can, like, when they read the characters in the standard script, they can sing in Cantonese, like fluently in Cantonese. But I don't think they could ever have a Cantonese conversation, right? They can't go down to Guangdong and like start speaking Cantonese, but they can sing it. I think that is really fascinating for me.
But you don't know how bad or good tones when they sing.
Oh, that's true. That's true. But it sounds good when they sing.
Actually, an interesting thing, but many people say like China is a very musical nation because of tones again. Because people here, like, they love to sing, and it's influence of a tones language system. And some research says like 80% of Chinese people are good singers.
That's really true.
It's true.
I think that also what you're saying about people loving to sing. It's completely true. People love to sing.
And when I start learning language, all textbooks said it's connected with the tone system of the language. Because they're more musical. They can feel the tones, the vibes of language. We can hear it. For us, it's the same. If you say chair, 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 it's still chair, you know?
Yeah.
But for them, this small difference in tone leads to totally different word. This, I still cannot understand. Can you imagine for them, for example, zo and zo, these two words is the same like microphone and computer. The difference between words for them with the tone, totally different. Because sometimes you're trying to tell something to Chinese people and they're like, why you don't understand? It's just like, it sounds almost the same. Yeah, the tone is a bit different, but all
for
the
them
word
it's
is
like a different word.
Yes,
right? It's a
I
different
know.
sound.
Yes,
It's like,
yes.
completely different.
Yeah.
I think also, this is coming off the topic a little bit, but also there's this research that I read about how Chinese people or Asians identify others. Because Chinese people all tend to have black hair and dark eyes, they then recognize you from like your facial variability a lot more than, say, Westerners who are more used to like variations of hair color and eye color. I think there's a really interesting parallel here where they have to be so specific with minute details on things that you and I would take for granted back home.
Yeah, to notice all these small details. Interesting theory. You can write a scientific article about this.
Okay. I mean, it's true. I mean, like you're talking about how they notice the sounds of the words, even if it's like zo or zo, it's still the same sound for foreigners, right?
Yeah, for me, like if you zo, because there is that and o, but no, if you say different tone, it's like totally different words, you know?
Yeah.
What more advice is like the best advice usually what people give to you, like find a Chinese girlfriend or find a Chinese boyfriend. Do you think it works? I saw a lot of these mixed couples who actually I think they use themselves for like a Chinese girl, for example, trying to get as much English from the guy like press as she can, and the same from this the guy, he trying like to use every minute with her to improve his Chinese.
I don't know. I've seen different variations in couples. Like I've seen some where like the guy, foreign guy, will speak like literally zero. And then he relies on the girlfriend to help him do like forms and filling out details and stuff. And then also in Shanghai, there's a lot of girls who speak really, really good English. Like they've never even been out of the country before. Like honestly. And you'll meet a girl or you'll meet a person, you'll be like, so did you study in England or America? They're like, no, I've never left the country. And you're like, what? Where'd you get this thick American accent from?
Found.
Yeah, found 158, Artem's favorite bar area. But they'll be like, oh, I just watched a lot of HBO like when I was younger, and you're like, how can you just become like straight out of California just by watching TV? But it's true, it really is like that.
No, again, like I don't want to give a lot of illusions to people. You can learn the language just to watching some movies with subtitles.
But it's different though, because anyway, you're learning some basic English at school here, right? And then watching a lot of HBO when you're a kid, that is kind of like an add-on.
Still doesn't work for many people here.
I think there's more environment for learning English here as a Chinese person.
In Shanghai, yeah.
In Shanghai, than there is, say, learning Chinese in Wisconsin, in America, right?
Yeah, for sure. Environment is super important. That's what I started to say after I understood my Chinese failed after 2 years of learning in university. I got back to Russia to finish my university. And then I started to do this environment, to create environment around me. I found Chinese friends who are learning Russian, and foreign students in Russia. I use QQ and QQ Zone, QQ Kongjian, that time, no WeChat. I watched Chinese cartoons. I got so many online friends. And it was a bit I think that time it was super weird. I went to QQ Zone and find some guys, mostly girls, yeah. And it was not harassment or something. I just I want to be your online friend. I'm learning Chinese. and could we be friends? And it's like, what? And many people thought that time it was fake foreigner guy. Could you imagine like 10, 11 years ago, the guy adding you on QQ Zone, which is like super like niche Chinese social media, or Ren Ren Wang just started, or even QQ, you just find a region you like, and then you find a person there and add, and like a Siberian guy sitting somewhere there, like adding you and saying, I'm learning Chinese, could you be my friend? But I got a lot of friends like this. I still meeting some of them around China, and that's how I improve my daily schedule was like, I get up, I reply to my online friends, then I go to university, then I sometimes force myself. You cannot just like randomly be a friend with a random person, but I try to be a friend with Chinese guys, students in Russia. I went to their dorms, I eat with them, and then we go to the movie together, and then I go back and watch Chinese cartoon, and then I go sleep.
Wow.
And it was like 1 year really like very like everyday Chinese environment. I created a small China in a Siberian city,
Small young China.
Yeah, and that's how really like in 1 year my Chinese improved so much. And then next year I went to the whole 1 month trip without smartphone, and I lost my electronic vocabulary in Urumqi, and I got a trip Urumqi, Lanzhou, Xi'an, Zhengzhou, Shanghai for 1 month. I'm alone, and Chinese environment, Chinese people. And that time all Chinese what I learned before, like this mosaic comes together. And then that time I was like, oh my God, I'm fluent. Yeah, really, like I broke this barrier, language barrier. That time is fall down. After 3 years of learning Chinese, I actually started to be like survival level. So it was much easier for you because environment is super important. In China, you cannot learn Chinese without, if you can't build your small China as me in your hometown, you can. In Wisconsin, there.
Wisconsin. Our million listeners from
it's
Wisconsin
interesting.
Just,
it's like
just disappear.
It's just a word to call any small city in America.
Wisconsin.
Is it in America, right? Yeah. Okay, my geography. That's actually, it's a good example how I cannot blame people when they don't understand where is Jiangsu, or like where is you don't know Chongqing. Chongqing is the biggest city in the world,
Yeah, but I mean,
we should know
because we live in China, right? And there are a lot of foreigners who don't know anything about China or the Chinese language.
Yeah, if you live in country and you don't know, like. At least you can listen to Young China, right?
Yeah, exactly. Listen to Young China. Look at us advertising ourselves to the people who are already listening to us on our podcast.
No, maybe
listen
you
to
can
more
share,
Young China.
Yeah.
So, okay, let me ask you a question. What's your favorite regional accent in China?
That one which they talk on CCTV. I mean, like the standard one. Like the thing.
But but that's standard because I've got a friend who's a TV host, and you've got to take like a mega exam to be on TV.
I know.
And your Chinese has to be like standard, like perfect.
I know.
Right?
Yeah.
But when you talk about standard in that sense, in the sense that you're talking about just now, it seems like you mean just Hebei standard.
No, I mean like the
perfect Chinese. Like
perfect Chinese is the best for me because I can understand it easily because that's how I learned from textbook, from movies, from like I understand.
But don't you think from the books even it was a little bit Beijing. There'd always be like an R at the end. Chumar, don't you remember? Because my friend
because like Mandarin is based on Beijing dialects. So and what we need to mention that like Mandarin existed only like 70 years after communists come. They made this Mandarin
unified language, simplistic language.
What you need to do to unite the country and to give education to everyone. Otherwise, how you will educate the whole country, people who cannot write,
And that's why, if you've noticed on Chinese TV, every TV show has subtitles. Every TV show, every movie, they always have subtitles because they're always trying to promote literacy.
Yeah, and it's because oral dialects, oral language is still super different while they make the same characters for the whole dialects.
Have you met anyone from a big city who doesn't speak Mandarin? I mean, older generation. Like when you were living in Guangzhou.
No, actually, in Guangzhou, a lot of local people. No, for sure they can understand a bit and speak, but not that good. I mean, like very bad, literally. Because like Cantonese people, like if you live in Guangzhou, I mean, like in Shanghai, I saw the news. Now they will put in the metro and public transport the third language, Shanghainese dialect.
Yeah.
In Guangdong, it was like
that forever already.
Yeah, forever.
Right.
So in Guangzhou, you even cannot get a job, I think, like in the service industry or
Without
like in the bank,
speaking.
whatever, without speaking Cantonese.
Wow. Okay, that's really interesting because one is I've got a good friend from Guangzhou. He says his English is better than his Mandarin. Like his English is great, but it's better. So in his rankings, it's like Guangdong language first, English, and then Mandarin.
No, the thing is, when you talk older generation, Guangzhou youngsters, they love to speak Cantonese, to be different, to talk to each other. It's also the way how you can secretly talk about something. So like some guys cannot understand, and for sure like foreigners will not understand.
But that's also a very interesting thing about how China now as a nation is trying to pull back again these individual languages. So for a very long time, it was about spreading 普通话 Mandarin, standard Mandarin to everyone at the cost of these minority languages. And now they understand that there's a real value, cultural value in holding on to these things. And so you can see some small movements towards saving these or preserving these languages and cultural elements.
But they still don't have enough classes in the school. That's very important.
Well, the Chinese kids already have too many classes as it is, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, I know this is a bit controversial. At the one hand, they are trying to save it, and the other hand, they don't push it in the schools. But anyway, I mean, like in Guangdong, they don't care. They get it from their childhood as an oral language, as the main language. And if you think like dialect like that, no, go to Guangzhou and talk to the young people, like 17, 16 years teenagers. They like speak to each other in Cantonese and they don't care about Mandarin.
So what you're talking about Shanghainese is really interesting because I just met a lady who's from Shanxi, which is really far away from Shanghai. She came to university around 25 years ago in Shanghai. And she asked me if I speak Shanghainese. I say, no, I speak Mandarin though. And she's like, oh, things must really changed in Shanghai then, because when she said that when she was here 25 years ago, she almost had to speak Shanghainese to get around. Like everyone spoke Shanghainese to each other because back then there weren't that many people from other cities here. It was mostly just Shanghainese. And even going to shops, talking to other people on the street, it was all Shanghainese. Shanghainese were not really speaking Mandarin to each other. And you still see that. Like you know, when you see the older generation, they always speak to each other in Shanghainese, never in Mandarin, right? And when they speak to you, like it's very thick. They either try like a little bit of Mandarin or they'll speak to you in Shanghainese and hope that you get it. And she hasn't really returned to Shanghai since. But that for me is in a way kind of shocking that only 25 years ago, this city, which was supposed to be the very international, like, you know, the number one international city of China, was in a way so insular. And then also one of our clients is a very, very big, very traditional hotel in Shanghai. It's around 60 years old. And it's mostly Shanghainese in there. But still, they only ever talk in Shanghainese to each other. Even when I'm having meetings with them and they're talking to each other, they'll speak in Shanghainese rather than in Mandarin. I don't think it's because they're trying to say something that I don't understand. I think they're just so used to it. There's just so, in a way, in the sense that for Shanghainese, there is Shanghai and there is China, and they are almost different.
I don't know. It's the same, I think, in all regions where they have a kind of very different dialect to the Mandarin. The same in Guangzhou, the same in like Sichuan, the same in Hunan, and they don't care about. They don't care about like
foreigners or outsiders, right?
Outsiders, yeah.
Okay, so I think we've come to our end here. We've just gone straight into this super deep topic, which obviously can be split into far more podcasts, but we've given a general intro here. So thank you so much for listening. We really look forward to your feedback. What we would especially like is to hear your ideas for what you would like to hear next. So my name is Lucien.
My name is Artem. See you next week.